You want to maximise your indoor cycling performance, whether that's to nail an indoor fitness test and get a PB or to win a race. You're going to want to know these 6 essential indoor tech tips. Before you even start riding, you need to nail your nutrition. Now, this typically begins 12 to 24 hours before because you need to make sure you ingest sufficient carbohydrate to fuel an intense effort. And this is probably more than you think. If your session or race is an hour or less, then studies suggest that you should be aiming to consume 5 to 8 grams per kilogram of body weight of carbohydrate before. And if you're going to be riding for 1 to 3 hours, then those same studies suggest that you should be more in the 6 to 10 grams per kilogram of body weight range. Then 2 to 3 hours before, it's recommended for optimal performance that you would consume a further 1 to 3 grams per kilogram of body weight of carbohydrate. And then as a final little top up in the sort of 30 to 15 minutes before a key effort, it's recommended you take on an additional 30 grams of carbohydrate regardless of your body weight. And I should stress that this is for peak performance. It's not for those casual low intensity training rides. And then while you're actually riding, again, if your session or race is less than an hour, then you can get away with not eating during it. But anything that's over an hour, up to sort of 3 hours, you're going to want to consume at least 30 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And then there's caffeine too. A well-established ergogenic aid in the scientific literature, which is NERD for performance enhancer. It helps increase alertness, reduce perceived effort, and can improve endurance. And the best way to take it is either in a tab or some kind of caffeine gel such as this. The reason being is because you're getting a measured and repeatable dose in something like this, whereas the amount of caffeine that you get in a cup of coffee can vary dramatically. But you may wish to abstain if you're training or racing in an evening, as it's likely to impact your sleep and therefore recovery. Next up is sodium bicarbonate. We've done videos on the benefits of bicarb. What it basically does is buffer lactate, which allows you to push that little bit harder during hard efforts. Studies have shown that it's able to reduce perceived exertion and time to exhaustion in time trial efforts, particularly in those 12 minutes or less. Now, if you're going to use it in a 20-minute effort, such as a time trial or an FTP test, it's still going to give you a benefit. Just be aware that don't go off too hard in that first 12 minutes, as you're likely to feel it significantly more after that. The standard protocol is for 0.1 to 0.15 grams per kilogram of body weight, split into 2 doses taken at 90 minutes and 60 minutes before your event. So for me, that works out as a 20-gram dose split into 2 10-gram portions, and I typically put it in, well, the sort of minimum amount of water and chug it, because it tastes absolutely rank. I mean, it's like drinking seawater, but it probably will make you faster. I'm not doing it. The downside of sodium bicarbonate is that it can cause GI issues. Explosive GI issues. Now, of course, the advantage here is that if you're going to do it anywhere and experiment with it, find out if it works for you, the best place to do it is inside while training indoors. Because if you're going to have an explosive event, it's much better it happens in the safety and sanctity of your own home rather than in public. Next, we're going to talk about cooling, and we're going to split this into 2 parts. Pre-cooling and then cooling when you're actually riding on the bike. Now, if you're going to be riding indoors in a hot and humid environment, as it typically is, then actually cooling yourself down is a fantastic way to give yourself an edge. The human body is essentially an engine, and like the engine in a car, it needs to be cooled in order to function efficiently. If your car radiator breaks and the engine can't be cooled, it overheats and fails very quickly. Consuming a slushy iced drink, the kind that used to give you a brain freeze as a kid, is an effective way to reduce your core temperature, but you can also simply immerse your hands in ice water like I'm doing right now. This also effectively reduces your core temperature. It's a simple tactic that can improve your performance in those crucial first minutes and give your body's cooling mechanisms a head start. As for cooling while riding, studies suggest that for every 1 degree Celsius rise in your core body temperature, your FTP can be reduced by 5 to 10%. So to put that into context, if your FTP is 300 watts, then you could be knocking 15 to 30 watts of what you can actually do, which is massive. Classic way to cool yourself is with the use of fans. You might decide that you want to use more than one, but to give yourself an edge and to take it to the next level, I'd highly recommend using an ice vest. I might look like I'm serving meals in a school cafeteria, but I'm actually really cool. This ice vest's really inexpensive. I picked it up for a few quid on Amazon, and it's a very effective way at cooling your core when you're riding indoors. And just to reiterate, for every degree rise in body temperature, cyclists typically lose 1 to 2% in gross efficiency. And it's not just that impacts you, it feels really uncomfortable, and the rate of perceived exertion goes up when you start to feel really hot and sweaty. So just mitigating that and making yourself more comfortable is going to improve your performance. And unless you monitor your core temperature, you're just going to be guessing and going off perceived exertion. But to really effectively dial in cooling strategies, you're going to want to monitor your core body temperature. If you can do that, it's an absolute game changer. Now, there are a number of different sensors available and ways you can do it. Some of them are quite invasive, but probably the easiest way is to use a core sensor on your heart rate strap, like I'm doing here. It's a really useful tool because it gives you real-time data telling you not only how hot you are, but also how your body responds to different training intensities and different efforts, and also different cooling strategies. And I pair mine through to my Wahoo, so I can see my body temperature in real time here. Pro riders are increasingly doing this too, and many of you will be familiar with the concept of using either heart rate or power thresholds to pace yourself so that you don't go into the red during a paced effort. But the same applies with temperature. We're increasingly seeing the use, as people get aware of it, of temperature threshold. Next thing is the kit that you use, because there's a big thing in training, and that's specificity. Now, if you're anything like me, the main reason why you ride a bike indoors is because you want to be better when you go outside into the real world. And anything that you can do when you ride indoors to make it as real and as actually like riding a bike in the real world as possible, the better. If, like me, you're training for long climbs, then I'd highly recommend that you elevate your front wheel. And the most inexpensive way that you can do this, and it's very effective, is to simply place some books under it to lift it up. You can also use something like a kicker climb, but books is a great solution. Now, doing this is important because it changes the orientation of your bike and therefore your muscles and how they fire on the bike, and it gives you that greater specificity of what you're going to want out in the real world when you're actually on a gradient. In addition, when you're performing long sustained efforts indoors, a lot of people get very uncomfortable, and that's often caused by the fact that an indoor bike is fixed and not moving underneath you compared to a bike outside in the real world. So a great strategy that you can employ, that's not essential, but something that a lot of people do find very useful, is to use either a rocker plate or a trainer such as this Kicker Move, which moves underneath you. Especially useful when you get out the saddle at replicating that real world feeling. Now, if you do start to feel discomfort when you're riding in any form, much like I was explaining with the overheating, it typically leads to a reduced performance and an increase in perceived exertion. that's not all. If you want to learn more about the benefits of heat training, it is an absolute game changer, then we've got a video that you can click on. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'm going to go now. Love you. Bye.